I'm Nick Forster. You are listening to eTown. Cedric Burnside is going to be back to play some more music later on. And coming up, Margot Silker is here. Really thoughtful singer-songwriter from the great Northwest. Right now, though, I want to tell you about our next guest. About 15 years ago, HBO made a movie about Temple Grandin, starring Claire Danes. The movie won a bunch of awards, and the story was compelling and largely true. It was how a young, undiagnosed, autistic girl born in the late 40s managed, with the help of a determined mother and a few outstanding teachers, to avoid what was then the standard treatment for a nonverbal young person, which was to be institutionalized. She found another path and was eventually around people who encouraged her to play to her strengths: drawing, designing, working with animals, putting her unique skills of perception to work. She was bullied and she was misunderstood and she was kicked out of school, but eventually she found her way to a ranch in Arizona, and that opened a bunch of doors for her. She went on to graduate from college, get a master's degree and then a doctorate. She designed innovative equipment that's now widely used in the cattle industry. She became a college professor, author, a unique and powerful spokesperson for autism. She's been awarded a bunch of honorary degrees. She was inducted into the American Academy of Sciences, Arts and Sciences, the National Women's Hall of Fame. She lectures all over the world, and she is someone who wants to help. She wants to make things better. So we're very happy to have her with us. Please welcome to eTown, Dr. Temple Grandin. Temple Grandin, welcome. They're excited that you're here. I'm excited that you're here.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed reading your book, Thinking in Pictures. And in that book, you describe 3 different basic ways of perceiving the world. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about those 3.
I'm an object visualizer. Everything I think about is a picture. My memory is sort of like a whole bunch of little phone pictures. And the kinds of things that object visualizers are really good at are art, animals, but also mechanical things. I worked with a lot of big metalworking shops that were owned by people that had undiagnosed autism. 20 patents. They were positively brilliant, but they couldn't do algebra. Yeah. I get worried about them getting screened out. Then you have your pattern, music, and math minds. Music and math go together. Art and mechanical goes together. Your pattern thinkers, your chemists, physicists, computer programmers. And
guitar players, too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And then the verbal thinkers, the people that think in verbally. In fact, I have a new book. It's called Visual Thinking, The Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions, where I go into science to show that there really are these different kinds of thinking. And a lot of people are mixtures of the different kinds of thinking.
Yeah. I imagine that I'm somewhere a hybrid of math and music and words, but who knows? There's a lot of things I can't do. I want to talk a little bit about how in your early days, as I was describing, when nobody knew really what was going on with you, but they found a way to play to your strengths, and you said that they encouraged you to draw.
Yeah, I was just drawing the same horse head over and over again. And what you got to do with an autistic kid's fixations is broaden it. Well, they said, let's draw the saddle, let's draw the whole horse. Broaden it. If the autistic kid gets fixated on cars, let's teach reading and math with cars. Let's learn about different kinds of cars, different vehicles like trucks. Broaden that.
Expand the fixation.
You expand the fixation. That's what you want to do.
Yeah. And you were lucky enough also to find some teachers who gave you chores, who you had to muck out some horse stalls.
Oh, I sure did. Yeah, I got kicked out of 9th grade for throwing a book at a girl. She called me a retard. And I got sent to special school. I was not the least bit interested in studying. So they put me to work cleaning horse stalls at the horse barn. I cleaned 9 stalls every day, bedded them, fed the horses, put them in and out. I basically ran the school's horse barn. and I learned how to work. Another thing is they would not let me become a recluse in my room. I had to attend classes, didn't really care much about studying, attend classes, attend cafeteria, attend chapel, and when I got nervous and I didn't want to go to the movie night, they said you have a choice. You can sit in the audience or you can be the projectionist. So I chose to be the projectionist.
That's really amazing. And you found, so you were prodded out of your comfort zone in a way.
You have to just kind of stretch just outside the comfort zone and give some choices. When the opportunity came to leave the Boston area and go out to my aunt's ranch, I was afraid to go. And Mother said, you have a choice. You can go for a week or you can go all summer. Not going is not an option. Going out to that ranch was the best thing I ever did. That's how I ended up in the cattle industry. And Ann, my aunt out at the ranch, was another really important mentor. I also want to add my science teacher, Bill Carlock, because he gave me interesting projects to get me motivated to study. I really have got to give these mentors and teachers a lot of credit.
Yeah. And so I want to mention that there is obviously a huge range of autism. It's a broad definition for a variety of differences in how people use their senses to comprehend the world around them, right?
Well, Einstein had no speech till age 3. I was nonverbal till age 4. Einstein would end up in an autism program. And then you have some that never learn to speak that have much more severe problems. And I want to emphasize that some of the non-speaking older children and adults can learn to type independently. And you need to use a tablet, because it's important for the print to appear next to the keyboard. They cannot gaze shift. So there's this whole big range, and it's all got the same name. And I'm seeing too many smart autistic kids that aren't learning basic skills like shopping. They're not learning working skills. They need to get out and do more things. And I'll tell you what to do with those video game recluses. I get them out working on cars and working on motors. That's been very successful for getting video game addicts off of video games.
So technology is not necessarily a good thing for autistic kids. Cell phones, video games, and all that stuff.
I think it needs to be limited. We limited TV to 1 hour a day, and TV was not allowed in the dining room. We weren't allowed to bring toys to the dining room table. We had to learn how to take turns and talk to each other. No, I think it needs to be limited. Another thing that really concerns me are the jobs that AI are going to take out, and things like video game design and a lot of illustrator jobs will go out. But the jobs that will not go well is fixing things. As I travel all around, I'm finding broken elevators all over everywhere because there's nobody to fix them. I just talked to a girl today that had to carry her service dog up the escalator because he was terrified of the escalator. And those aren't getting fixed either.
So those are good tasks for young autistic kids to aim towards. Practical skills, repairing things, mechanical skills.
Well, also things like fixing electrical power grid systems, water systems. We need our visual thinkers working on those things.
Yeah, it's interesting. So visual thinkers like you, I understand you also have that in common with one of our great inventors, Nikola Tesla,
That's right.
whose laboratory was down near Colorado Springs. As I understand it, he had the ability to visualize mechanical equipment so completely that he could dismantle it in vision form and then understand more about it.
Also on making turbines, these are things that turn. He could tell if it would run right by sound it made. Total mechanical genius.
Yeah. And so you can do that too. You can internally, in your mind,
yes, I can.
You can visualize the way something is going to work.
That's right.
And manifest it enough to actually analyze it and then draw it.
I can see how things work. In fact, I think we need to have our visual thinkers maybe deciding what the mathematical thinkers ought to work on. Of course, I spend a lot of time at the airport, and they spent millions of dollars trying to fly airplanes on pig fat and corn and wood chips and all kinds of stuff like that. You got one problem. Pigs can fly, and corn can fly, but the problem is there's no way to grow enough of them.
Yeah.
And there's not enough of the feedstock material. Millions of dollars got spent on this.
You're talking about alternative fuels.
Oh, alternative fuels.
Yeah.
Alternative fuels work at the local level. Like, let's say you've got a pig farm and you use the methane from the lagoons to run your vehicles, or you get the methane off the beef plant, waste lagoons, run the boilers with that. That kind of stuff is sustainable.
Yeah.
but just, you're not going to fly it. You couldn't grow enough corn. We're putting 40% of our corn into ethanol right now.
That doesn't
There's
make
no
any
way
sense. Yeah.
you're going to feed, you couldn't grow enough corn to feed all those airplanes.
Yeah.
But this is something that got millions and millions and millions of dollars spent on it. And they didn't look at, well, how much of the actual raw material are you going to have to feed into this process? There's not enough of it.
All they needed was some visual thinkers to stop them from doing that whole thing.
It's amazing. I don't
can
know how the
see it.
chemists make pig fat into airplane fuel.
Yeah.
That to me is magic.
Yeah.
But when I looked up how many pigs it would take for one flight, I'm going, this is not going to work.
No. Okay, well, so there's an element of common sense that we should be tapping, and this is a resource of visual thinkers that we need to
I
understand.
think visual thinking is common sense.
Yeah.
Let's just go back to simple things. You see a grape on the floor in the supermarket, you clean it up before somebody slips and falls on it.
Yeah.
That's an example of seeing risk. In my book, Visual Thinking, I discussed the Fukushima nuclear power plant, and they did a perfect job, the mathematicians, on making earthquake-proof, but they didn't see that it might be a good idea to use watertight doors to prevent the electrical emergency cooling pump for drowning in the non-waterproof basement. Simple waterproof doors, it would not have happened.
Wow.
I'm like going, I couldn't believe it. I can't design a nuclear reactor, but maybe I need to work on the safety systems.
Oh, wow. Well, let me ask you what it's like being a visual thinker. So when you walk into a place like this, and there's a bunch of people, and there's all kinds of different colors, and this is unfamiliar territory to you, do you capture these images and store them, and are you able to sort of keep them and process them? Or
Well, let's
what's
look at
it
how
like?
do I learn something complicated. I remember when I first went into my first big beef plant. It was the Swift plant in Arizona. And I looked down over the whole floor, and I go, this is also complicated. How does a manager understand it? Well, I found out 20 years later, lots of times they don't understand it. But I can't just go zap and take a picture of the whole place. I tune in on little details. And one of the things that attracted my attention was a cart for 55-gallon drums with a ring that flipped over the drums. And then I was going over there every Tuesday afternoon. I made my own internship, and I'm like taking more little phone pictures. And then after 6 months of Tuesday afternoons, I could then play the video. But it took time to download it. It doesn't happen instantly. I don't remember every hotel room I've ever stayed in. I just remember the really awful and the really weird.
Yeah. What about faces? Do you remember faces?
No, I'm really bad about faces, and
Yeah.
it's an embarrassment. You know, I'm flying all the time on the airlines. There's flight attendants I should be recognizing, and I'm not, and it's very embarrassing. That's one of the problems in autism is face blindness. I tend to remember, you know, people by some distinct feature that the person might have, or they've got the blonde braids or something like that.
Yeah. Well, we'll try to spend more time together, and maybe after 8 or 10 times, you'll remember me.
But I'm really bad about that, and I have especially hard time when somebody's out of context. Like I run into the meat manager, the plant manager of the meat plant at the supermarket, and he doesn't have his hard hat on. Then
Right.
that's why I'm harder to recognize him.
That's hard for everybody.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, in case you just tuned in, you're listening to eTown. I'm here with Temple Grandin. Couple things I want to ask you. One, your interest in humane treatment of animals, and some people find that to be sort of antithetical to the idea that you're facilitating the process of slaughtering animals. And so is that a contradiction? Have you gotten criticism for that in the past?
Well, we have to be giving them a good life. The other thing that people don't realize is that 20% of the world's land can only be grazed with either bison, cattle, goats, sheep, ruminant animals. And it's like eastern Colorado. There's a 100-mile stretch that can only be grazed. And if we do that grazing right, you can improve the land. You can actually sequester carbon. I've written a paper on grazing cattle, sheep, and goats, important part of a sustainable agricultural future. But I feel very strongly we have got to treat them right. One thing I'm very concerned about in animals is some of the breeding. Bulldogs that can't breathe, it's horrible. And we're breeding some cattle to where they're, getting heavy so quickly they're getting heart failure. That's not okay. And I'm going to bash pets just as bad as I'm going to bash a food animal for breeding animals that are simply not functional. And I'll tell you right now, I just got back from the London vet show, and I saw a video of the bulldog surgery. It's a very invasive surgery. They cut down in the nostrils, open up the throat, hack all this flesh out of the inside of the throat, and it only half fixes the dog. we simply should not be breeding animals that have problems like walking or breathing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. There you go, using common sense again.
No, we have to give animals a good life.
Yeah. Your other big passion is teaching, and you've been a professor at Colorado State University for a long time.
34 years.
Yeah. And what kind of kids are you getting these days? What kind of students are you getting?
Well, COVID, I think, kind of knocked the wind out of a lot of students. But one thing I'm concerned about is we've got students growing up today totally removed from the practical world. I had a student in my class who had never used a ruler to measure anything in their life. And they're going to grow up and make policy about stuff? That concerns me.
Yeah. And I know you're very pro work, getting young
Yes.
people to learn whatever their circumstances are.
Well, I
do
learned how to
some
work cleaning those horse stalls. And the other thing I did while I was in that special school is I had a little sign painting business. And one of the things I had to learn is to make signs that people would want. My first paid customer was a hair salon, so I put the Breck lady on it. But I'm seeing too many smart autistic kids, ADHD, dyslexic kids, where the parents do everything for them, and they're 16 years old, fully verbal, and they've never gone shopping. They aren't learning bank account and budgeting. They aren't learning life skills. And we need to start young kids with jobs where they're doing a task on a schedule for somebody outside the family, like walking the neighbor's dog, somebody else's dog. And they've got to be over there every morning at 7 o'clock to walk Mr. Jones's dog.
Yeah, there's no paper routes anymore for
I
a
know
lot
that.
of people.
I'm fully, so what we have to do is make substitutes for that. But I'm seeing smart students graduate from college, maybe magna cum laude, and they cannot handle the workplace.
Yeah.
They haven't learned any working skills.
Yeah.
And I think this is a big problem. And then when I was out in industry supervising installation of a lot of equipment I designed, I worked with people that barely graduated from high school that owned great big shops, and they had 20 patents. And this is one of the things that gets me really upset when I go back and forth between the worlds. And these mechanical people are not getting replaced. They're retiring out. And the kids that need to be fixing things and building things in things like factories, they're playing video games in the basement.
Yeah. All right, so what are you going to do?
Well, we need to be getting a lot of hands-on stuff back in the schools, and we need to be introducing this stuff young. I mean, I was using tools when I was in second grade. All the kids in the neighborhood were. Learn how to use them safely.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are you're talking about fundamentals of parenting in a modern age, and I think particularly when parents have kids later in life, they do tend to coddle and take care of and do a lot of things for the kids. Younger parents tend to,
Well, the thing is, kids don't tinker. I mean, I would spend hours when I was in second grade tinkering with a little bird kite to get it to fly.
Yeah, but you were a weirdo.
But other kids built things too. And the rule of the parents was they didn't intervene unless we did something dangerous.
Yeah.
Then they would intervene.
Yeah.
But otherwise, they just let you tinker and make mistakes. And they didn't come and help me make the bird kite fly. They wanted me to figure it out for myself.
Yeah. I mean, I made some unbelievably terrible science projects by myself when I was a young person without supervision that were just absolutely embarrassing.
As long as they weren't dangerous.
They weren't dangerous.
Then the parents didn't intervene. If we started to do something dangerous, parents would intervene.
But for autistic kids, and again, I'm speaking very broadly because you mentioned it's ADHD, it's dyslexia, it's Asperger's, it's a wide range of disconnections that happen in the brain.
Well, but on the other hand, you take out some social circuits, then you get circuits for doing higher math, because you have the math type autistic is totally brilliant in physics and math, and then you've got the visual thinker, can build any mechanical thing, see how to fix things, and you need both minds working together. I've got to go back to food processing. What I've learned after working 25 years in construction, working on these plants, mainly up through the 1990s, that the visual thinkers like me, the shop people, invent all the mechanical devices, think packaging equipment. And then our degreed mathematical engineer, we need them for boilers and refrigeration. That requires too much math. We don't touch those. We don't understand them. But the thing is, you got to have both kinds of minds to make the factory work. And this is true for just about any food processing plant.
But I think the key is what you benefited from when you were young, which is that somebody recognized that deep inside you, even though you were nonverbal, there was something really special going on, and they worked hard to bring it out.
I had a very good speech therapist. I was speaking by age 4. You know, what you want to do working with these little ones is work on words. The kids like a phone on a slow connection. Give them time to respond. There was a lot of emphasis on learning how to wait and take turns, and then skills. And the child should like going to therapy.
Yeah.
There was no forced eye contact. There's been way too much of that. And then developing strengths. My ability in art was always encouraged. I was given tools. I am also seeing math kids that are not having their strengths developed. And you might have a third grader in math who's a big behavior problem because they're bored stiff doing baby math when they need to be moved ahead in math.
Right.
Okay, we want to beat China. We better develop our math kids. It's that simple.
Yeah. We're gonna wrap up here in a second, but I just want to ask you about, in general now, the spectrum has become sort of a catch-all phrase for any quirky human, somebody who maybe lacks some social graces. Well, they're on the spectrum.
You see, what's happened, let me just explain the history of the diagnosis. In the 80s, to be labeled autistic, you had to be socially awkward and have speech delay. Then in the early 90s, they put Asperger's in there, which is basically socially awkward, no speech delay. Then in 2013, they merged it all together. So now at one end, you've got a quirky, socially awkward, no speech delay person. And the problem you've got is, when does geeky or nerdy become autistic? There's no black and white dividing line.
And there's no diagnosis.
Yeah, and then you've got very severe, maybe they have epilepsy and other issues on top of the autism. Some of these people can learn to type independently. Some of them have a lot more issues and require 24/7 care.
Yeah.
And it's all got the same name.
Right. And is our educational system and underpinnings of our social network adequate, up to the task for recognizing and dealing with these various challenges for young people?
Well, I'm seeing, I've just in the last year, 3 people told me that math kids are not getting developed. And then the other problem with the non-speaking individuals, you might have a 10-year-old or an adult who's non-speaking, and they have hidden painful medical issue, like a urinary tract infection or an ear infection, or they're constipated or gastrointestinal issues. And the doctors just say, well, it's just autism. And they've got painful stuff wrong with them that needs to be medically treated. And that's not looked at enough.
So here's my question, Temple. You are 77 years old. You've been at this a long time. You have a big heart. You want to make things better. You're clearly frustrated by a whole bunch of stuff that isn't going well and could go better. And you're out there talking. And do you feel like you're making a dent? You're making a difference?
I have parents come up to me and say, my kid went to college because of one of your books. My kid got a job because I got him out doing things. Now, I'll only give you a few places where we do need some accommodations at work. Let's avoid multitasking chaos at a takeout window, chaos at a Christmas wrapping station. The other thing is, I need an external working memory. So if I'm going to close the cash register out at Walmart, let me make a pilot's checklist. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, little pilot's checklist of the steps, and teach the individual to make these checklists.
So what you're saying is, somebody who's autistic needs that reinforcement of something that's a checklist, because they may not be able to memorize the actual steps.
Well, let me tell you, pilots use it on every single flight.
Yeah, right.
It's required. And pilots then taught doctors how to use it.
Yeah.
But, what happens, they'll say, well, I already showed you how to run the French fry machine 5 times. Are you stupid? You see, that problem can be solved by just making a checklist. When I had a job in graduate school milking cows, they had a checklist in the milk house on how to set up the equipment and how to clean it.
Yeah.
That checklist had about 10 items on it. It saved me.
Yeah. Temple, let me ask you, if people want to learn more about what you're up to, because you're up to a lot. You are an incredibly prolific writer. You're constantly putting out papers. You're still active. Your speaking takes you everywhere. People want to know more about what you're up to. Is there a website they can go to?
Well, I'm working right now. I've got my visual thinking book out there. I'm just updating my new livestock handling and transport, just got published today. So I'm still doing things. And I've got a little book called Autism and Education. It's a little small book that's really good for parents of young kids so they're not overwhelmed with a big encyclopedia-sized book. And my website, Grandin.com, has my livestock information and my livestock books. And TempleGrandin.com is my autism website.
Okay, so you're not going to be hard to find out there.
Yeah, you can find me, and I'll even you have my cell phone number. So
do you listen to music ever? Because I know that
yeah, I
for
listen to
autistic-
music, and I really like some of the country western trucking songs.
Okay.
You know, C.W. McCall, Wolf
Yeah.
Creek Canyon.
Yeah.
There's a great big convoy trucking through the night.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of songs I really like. I'm not into the romance songs.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that music is a part of your life, and I'm glad you could be a part of our music-centric show. It's really a pleasure hanging out with you, Temple. I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me.
Yeah, we'll come back anytime. That is Dr. Temple Grandin, professor of animal science at Colorado State University, author, inventor. Thank you so much for being here.